Hi, I'm Julie Johnson with Firebox Training. Today I'm going to show you how to create a train process so you can register a new employee step by step through several pages. So the first thing we're going to need is the model layer. I'm going to right click here on New and we're going to create some business components from tables. What I'm looking for here, I have my HR connection right here. Okay, we're going to query, and you'll see that we've got the employees table right here. Let's call this employee EO for entity object, and now we'll go on to the next step here. We'll expose this in the view object. We'll call this employees VO. Now in addition to that updatable view object, we want to have some read-only view objects for model-based list of values. So I'm just going to hit query here, and we want to do this for the departments, jobs, and employees because an employee can have a drop-down for managers. So let's grab employees. We'll call this employees ROVO for read-only view object. Departments ROVO and jobs ROVO. And let's go ahead and create that. Now I'm going to go to the view objects that I just created, the read-only view objects, and create some order to it. So when we have the drop-down, it'll be in some kind of, ASCII order, so we don't have to scroll through the whole list. Okay, so let's first of all take a look at our departments read-only view object. Here's the query. I'm going to edit this, and we'll say order by department name. And we'll do the same thing for employees. Order by last name and first name. Jobs. We'll order by job title. And we'll also take our updatable view object and order that by last name and first name as well. Okay, so now save everything. Now we're going to go to our attributes for our updatable view object here, and I'm going to go first of all to the job ID, and we're going to go to list of values. And we're going to make this a model-driven list of values. So our list data source is our jobs ROVO. The list attribute is the job ID. So that's how they're joined together. And then we go to our user interface hints, and we want it to be a choice list displaying the job title. Okay, hit OK. We'll do the same sort of thing for our department. Data source, ROVO. List attribute, there's the department name. And we want to display a choice list with the department name. And we will include a no selection item, blank item, first of list. And, if we want to make this labeled, we can do this. For example, we might say no department. And now let's do the same thing for our manager ID. Now let's have it display the last name and the first name. And we'll also include a no selection item. And we'll just say here, no manager. Now I already happen to have a sequence defined in the database to generate the employee ID. It's called employees_SEQ. So what I can do is actually take my entity object right here. Here are my attributes. Here's the employee ID, and I can provide a default value. So here for the type, it's integer, and for the default value, I'll say expression. And inside of here, I'm going to say new oracle.jbo.server.sequence impl, passing in the name of the sequence, and then ADF object get DB transaction get sequence number. I know it looks pretty long, but it's the way of creating, using a groovy expression, the generating the default ID. Okay, so now that we have that in there, we'll go ahead and save this. And I'd also like to provide a default value for our hire date. So I'm going to highlight hire date and then go here to the expression, and I'll say ADF.current date. And we want this to be a date instead of a timestamp. Okay, so far so good. Let's right-click on here and run our business component browser and see what it looks like when we create a new employee. So here's our employees VO1 right here, and I'm going to hit the plus, and you'll see that it generated a new ID. I can put in my name, my email, phone number. See how we have a default hire date? Here we have a drop-down for the job ID, a drop-down for the manager ID, as well as for the department. That's because we made model-based, model-driven lists of values. Let's put in a salary as well. And I'll go ahead and try to save the changes to the database. So it looks like these persisted. Now one more change that I might make is go in there and say that the employee ID is never updatable. That's pretty easy. I just go right up in here and just say updatable, never. So it'll be grayed out. Now that we have our model, let's go ahead and work on our view controller here. So what I'd like to do is just create a new bounded task flow that's going to be responsible for building the train process, essentially. So I click on JSF Facelets, ADF task flow, and in here I'm going to call this new emp task flow. I'm not going to create with page fragments. I'm going to just let this be top level pages. If I did create it with fragments, I could then include it in a top level page using a region, but that doesn't really matter for this example. So here we'll just make sure we create this as bounded task flow. Make sure that you say create train. Now that we have this, we're going to look at our data controls right here. And now we're going to look at our employees view object, and here are our operations. So the create insert creates a new record and it places it in the iterator result set. So we have that. Then our next step, our next activity, we're going to have a few activities in here. Let me make this a little bit smaller here. We're going to have a view, and this is where we're going to capture the contact information, followed by the salary information, then any other type of information, and then maybe have a review splash page. Okay, now let's have a control flow case that goes from here to here. We'll just call this new emp. And this create insert activity, we want this to have an outcome of new emp. And in fact, if we take a look at our property inspector right here under fixed outcome, in this drop-down, you'll see that new emp actually shows up in the drop-down. Let me make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Now notice how we have these dotted lines going from view to view. That's because we said create as a train. So now we're going to grab a task flow return activity and place it on here. And we'll do the same thing for rollback. And of course, we need to have control flow cases that go from here and to here. Now the reason why we're getting these red X's is because these pages haven't been created yet, and that's fine. We'll get there. Now, when we enter our bounded task flow, we want to automatically start a transaction. So to define that, just click anywhere in this area right here, and you'll see that we have our task flow definition in the property inspector. So it's in here where you want to scroll down until you see the transaction and say always begin new transaction. Okay, and it's right in here that we have commit, and right here we have rollback. Those are our two choices. So once again, when you specify that your bounded task flow always starts a new transaction, then your return activities either need to say commit or rollback. We're going to have buttons on this page that determine whether we're committing or rolling back, but we're not quite there yet. Okay, now let's go ahead and create these pages right here. I simply double-click on this view activity, and it wants to create a file called contact.jsf. Great, we'll stick with that and hit OK. Okay, so we've got this nice blank page, and what I'd like to do is place on this page right here, we have our data controls, and here's the employees VO1. So I can place a form on here, and remember, all I'm doing is collecting the contact information, and any extraneous information I can get rid of. So I have my employee ID, first name, last name, email, and phone number. I'm not going to mess around with any navigation controls or anything like that. And what I'd also like to do is have some train navigation on this page. So what I can do is actually right-click on my form and insert inside of here a panel stretch layout. And you'll see that there's 5 different facets here. What we're going to do is actually place our panel form layout inside of this center facet. Okay, and up in this top facet up here is where we'll just do a quick little search for train. And here is the train component, and I'll just place it right up here. And you'll see that it automatically is referencing the train model that's automatically created when we create that bounded task flow using a train. Okay, so during runtime, we'll see the different nodes in the train. And in fact, if we want to provide some train buttons, we can put a train button bar in here as well. In fact, I can place it right before the panel form layout, so it kind of looks like that. Now, if I really wanted to make this scalable, I could create a page template and then base all these pages on that, but that's beyond the scope of this exercise here. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is go to the salary. Okay, so here I have my salary information. Once again, I'm going to drag this data control on there, but only include the salary information. Get rid of all the non-salary information. Now, to save time, one of the things I can do actually is, this is going to be a huge time saver actually. Let me go to the first page that we created, which was the contact page. And here's that panel stretch layout. If I copy that panel stretch layout and then go to the other page, which is for the salary, I can actually just right-click on the form and just say paste, and then make whatever necessary tweaks that I want to do here. So I can go like this, drag this into the center facet, Okay, so let's see what we have here. Ooh, I accidentally deleted the train button bar, so we can include that real quickly right up here. Okay, so now let's take a look at our panel right here. Let's see the structure of our page. You'll see that everything is inside of this panel stretch layout right here. There's my train. There's a panel group layout with the train button bar, and then the panel form layout with our form components. Really, I can just right-click, copy, and now let's go to create the other info page. Right-click on the form and paste, and then we make whatever necessary changes we want to here. So here, I'm going to get rid of the panel form layout, and now I'm going to take this, drag it on here again, only include the stuff we need. The salary and commission percent were included on the previous page. There we go. Let's save what we have so far. And now, here's the review page. I'll paste that on there. There's my panel form layout. Delete that. Drag this on here again. And this is going to be a read-only form. So far, so good. Okay, so on this page right here, I want to include a couple buttons, one to say save the changes, the other to say undo or cancel. Okay, so I can just go down here and drag two buttons. One will say save changes. And as far as the action goes, notice that we have two choices, OK or undo. Here's the second button, and I'll have this say cancel, undo. Now I'd like these to appear side by side, so I'll highlight them and surround with a panel group layout. There we go. And there's one thing that I want to address, and that is when you're going from page to page, it's going to look for any required fields. And so, for example, on our contact page, we do have some required fields that are on subsequent pages. So what we'd like to do is find our bindings for that page. Okay, so here's our page definition file for our contact page, and I'm going to make this a little bit wider. You'll see here that we have this thing called skip validation. If I say true, then what that's doing is it's skipping any kind of validation, so we are able to actually go on to the next page. So we'll do the same sort of thing for our salary page. Okay, here's our page definition. Skip validation, true. And then for the other information page, we're not going to skip validation because we've already collected all the information and we do want to validate somewhere along the way. Okay, so we'll leave that alone. We are almost finished. The last thing I want to talk about is what the labels are going to be on these on this train component right here. And we actually control that. If we look at our bounded task flow, you'll see here that here's our train stop for each one of these guys right here. What I'd like to do is provide a display value for each one of these train stops. So I'll right-click on the train stop and insert inside a display name. Okay, and I'll call this contact. So if I don't provide these display names, then it'll be really ambiguous where we are. You'll just see some little dots, but it won't have the actual label. Okay, so let me do the same thing here. Display name. This is for the payment information. And then here's our next third train stop. This will be, we'll call this additional info. And then here's our last one, and we'll just call this review. Okay, so we want to be able to call this bounded task flow from somewhere. So I'm going to go to our ADFC config file, and we're going to have a page. We'll just call this emp table. And it's going to call our bounded task flow. Okay, so here's our new emp task flow. We're going to have a control flow case that goes from here to here, and when there's an outcome of new emp, it takes us to the bounded task flow. We have an exclamation mark here because we haven't created the page yet, so let's go ahead and create that wonderful page. And now I'll drag this on here. We're going to create an ADF. Let's make it an ADF read-only table. Now, to make this look a little bit nicer, I'd actually like to place this inside of a stretch container. So I'll put a panel stretch layout in here, and then I'll drag the table inside of the center facet. So it just looks a little bit nicer. Now, of course, I want to have some kind of button or link on this page that kicks off the process of creating a new employee. So I'll just put a button, maybe I just put it right up here. Now you'll see it's a huge button, and that's because it's directly inside of a stretch container. So what I can do is just right-click on there and surround with a panel group layout, and that looks a lot nicer. So let me just give this an appropriate label. We'll just say new employee. And you'll see here that for the action, new emp, that's coming from the task flow. Okay, so let's give this a whirl. I'm going to right-click on my emp table right here, and we're going to run this page and make sure everything's working fine. And here's our page. I'm going to click on New Employee, and you'll see that it automatically populated the employee ID. Let me place my name in here. Okay, I'll go on to the next page. Before I hit next, though, look at these labels. See how these are automatically in here? And the way the default behavior of the train is that just the next step is available. You can't skip over steps by default, but you can always override that behavior if you look at the definition of your train. Okay, so let's hit next. I'll give myself a nice little salary in here, and I won't bother with a commission percent. Let me hit next again. And I'll give myself a job ID. Okay, now hit next. Here's our splash page. If I hit cancel, then it will not persist the changes. If I hit save changes, then it will be saved. Before I hit save changes, let's make sure, okay, this is employee ID 226. So I save my changes, and notice how Julie Johnson was placed in here. Okay, so it has persisted, and we successfully created our train. Well, I hope you got a lot out of this video tutorial. Please visit our website at www.fireboxtraining.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/fireboxtraining. Have a great day.